Hey, everybody. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a guy that I worked with for 13 years. His name was Mark, and he had a really big impact on my life. Mark and I worked together at a nonprofit that put on educational events like seminars and conferences and things like that, and big things in hotels that went, for 2 to 5 days, and they were at big hotels and ballrooms and things like that. And those are big, complicated events to make happen. And it was Mark's job to make them happen, and I was sort of his assistant. And something I found out during those 13 years was that Mark was really, really reliable. And I also found out that I really, really was not. If you ever work with a really competent person, one of the main things you learn is that you're not as competent as you thought you were. That's what's great about work. You learn a lot about yourself. And the cool thing about Mark, he's someone that I would call a high reliability person, an HRP, we can call it. And because he could be juggling 12 things to make one of these events happen, and he doesn't drop a single one, and he does this every day for years and years and years. And if somebody ever throws an extra ball in there, he just catches it and he juggles 13 and doesn't drop any. I'm going to give you an example. At these events, we would often have a banquet on the first night where everybody would come and we'd eat and talk to each other and stuff. And people quite often would come to him and say, at this event that's coming up, can you do this special thing for me that you don't do for everyone else? People are kind of entitled like that. But all of that landed on Mark. And this one time, this actually happened. Somebody who attended our events regularly was chatting with Mark at a cocktail hour or something like that. And he said, Mark, we're going to have this event 2 years from now. And I'm going to come, and that first night we're going to have a banquet, and I'm going to bring my 3 kids. And one of those kids is a Chihuahua. And we think it would be just darling if the dog got to come to the banquet with us. So buy an extra seat, and the dog will sit there. And I want the dog to have a little name tag, and I want you to order him the steak, but cut the steak up because he's a little bitty dog, and so he needs to have these nice little bite-sized chunks. And Mark was very gracious, and he's like, absolutely, I can do that for you. That would be an easy thing to miss, right? And of course, he's got 200 other people telling him the same exact type of things, of just little bits of special treatment that they would like for something 2 years down the road. Mark was so great at things like that. So 2 years down the road, those people came, they brought their 3 children, and when the Chihuahua came and sat in his seat at the banquet, he had a little nameplate there, and he had cut up steak, which no one else had, and they were very happy. That's my example of how reliable Mark was. Did not drop the ball ever, and he was just amazing. And it was in that context that I started to realize, wow, I have a long way to go here. Another example, one time we had a conference up near Calgary, and it was absolutely beautiful up there. The mountains are incredible. They're about as tall as the mountains are here. But when you're at the bottom of the mountains, you're way, way lower than we are here, so they're much more impressive. But we were at a conference there, and we were there for a whole week, and we did stuff. And the final night came, and in the following morning, I was going to have my plane ride home. But then I realized that I had bought my plane ticket slightly wrong. And basically, it meant that I was going to have to spend a night and a day at the airport, sleeping in a chair because I didn't have a hotel room for that night. I just got the dates wrong. So what did I do? I found the most reliable person that I could find and just screamed for help. And he just kind of looked at me without blinking for a minute. And then he said, I'll see what I can do. And because Mark was so reliable and was always able to be there for people and help them out, 100 people all over the world owed him favors. So he called in a few with the people at the hotel, and he's like, okay, John, you have made my life more stressful today, but I have called in a few favors, and I got you a suite. So because of my boneheaded move, I got an awesome room that night. It had a fireplace. It was great. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of the awesomeness of Mark and the less awesomeness of me. And the thing of working with Mark is it made me want to become more like him, become more reliable and solid for the people around me. Now, the question is, why bring this up at church? Well, it turns out that the Bible is very into reliability and dependability. The story of the Bible, in fact, is the story about how God is creating a universe, hasn't finished yet, but is still going, and has called people to partner with him in making the universe a good and beautiful place. And he made us so that we can be reliable partners. It turns out God is a very reliable partner in such projects. It turns out people are less reliable in such projects. And that's really the story of the Bible. And it's the story of how God is so reliable that he somehow fixes the unreliability of people. Very cool story. And the Bible's word for it is actually faithfulness. The word reliable and reliability doesn't really come in there very much, but faith and faithfulness does. And just so happens that's the theme of today, the theme of faith and Advent. I'm going to give you an example of some places in the Bible where this is mentioned. And I took out the word faith and faithful and replaced it with reliable, just so you can kind of see how it fits. Be glad, people of Zion, because the Lord is reliable. Praise the greatness of our God, a God you can rely on, no exceptions. God's loyal love is created new every morning. How great is your reliability? God can be relied on to bring forth justice. Reliably obey these commands to love the Lord your God, to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. Let's look at some more. Let love and reliability never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. God can be relied upon to bring forth justice. You have relied on me, and it has healed you. That's something Jesus said once. The one who is reliable in little things is also reliable in big things. God is reliable. Rely on God. Be reliable. One of the great things about the journey is that we're very diverse spiritually. We believe different things about Jesus, different things about God. But the things that seems to really bind us together is everybody here thinks love is a really good idea. That we think that love God, love others idea makes sense and it works to build your life around that. I kind of think that's a common place where we all are. Well, reliability is right in there with love, because how can you love your neighbor if you're unreliable to them? Love means being someone who can be trusted and can be relied on. So that's right at the center of what we're called to do. And that's what I want to talk about today, my process of growing in reliability from someone who was born not terribly reliable into someone who is slightly more reliable than I used to be. Some of you are very reliable already. You know who you are. You can tune out if you like. So here at the first point of my story, I've already done the first thing, and that's really nice. The first thing that you want to do is spend time with reliable people. And this is something that God just made happen for me. I didn't even know I was unreliable until he put some reliable people in my life. So there are two very important things. I started working with this guy, Mark, at work. And also I discovered a church called The Journey, and I met another Mark Reitzma. And neither of those things were part of a diligent plan to become more faithful. It was just something God gave me because he knew that I needed it. So I spent 40 hours a week working shoulder to shoulder with Mark, this really reliable guy, and it really impacted me. And several other hours a week, I would work with another Mark Reitzma, to help make church happen. And the thing about Mark is that you don't really notice him. He's not really an up on a stage with the lights on kind of guy. But if you ever look behind the curtain, you will see Mark there getting things done and making things happen. Right? I see a lot of nodding, so you know what I'm talking about. And that's just the way Mark is. Always there getting stuff done. And he's not just always been here for church, he's been there for me as well. You know how they say if you want to know who your friends are, just move and ask people to help you move? All right? So I thought that sounded like a great idea, so I bought a house. And I invited people to come and help, and of course, Mark was one of the first people there. and he was there carrying boxes labeled miscellaneous because, again, not terribly organized. Everything is miscellaneous. Jess likes that one. So by rubbing elbows with the two Marks, they started to rub off on me. And that's what spending time with reliable people will do, that they will rub off on you. Whoever you hang out with, you will tend to start to become more like them. And that's something that I've found great about the journey in particular. There are some people here that I really look up to. There's Mark, and there's other ones as well. And I am a better person now than I was 12 years ago, I think, when we started here. And that's one of the great things about church. It helps you to grow. So I had the idea that maybe I should grow a little bit, and immediately the first thought that came to mind was, well, I can't, because I'm not that kind of person. You ever have that voice in your head? That I want to grow, but that's just not me. That's somebody else. I was born a disorganized, forgetful person, and I need to just accept that and not do all of this non-self-accepty stuff of growing, because that's just not right. Well, so if you want a life hack, if you don't want to grow, just stop taking responsibility for your life. That's all you got to do, and it'll really stop any kind of growth that might want to happen in your life. So that's just a thing that you can do. Because if you're a human being, there's a part of you that always is going to resist change. That's just the way we're built. And your job is to not listen to that voice. So if the first step in becoming a high reliability person is spending time with reliable people, the second one is to take responsibility. Some people are just born with a very, very conscientious personality. Getting things done, being organized, hitting deadlines is just a part of how they are, and it's second nature to them. God love you. I thank God for you. I am not one of you. It's not a way that I just started out in life. I want to have a little caveat. I have a wonderful personality, and I really like it. I love being the kind of person that I am. I am agreeable and easygoing. I'm open to new experiences, and I love being that kind of guy. I like that guy. Some people have to work really, really hard to be as chilled out as me. And they do. But then again, there's something that I need to work hard on as well, and it's things like managing my time and making to-do lists and getting things done on time. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and this just happens to be one of mine. Being reliable is just a part of loving God and loving my neighbor, and it's something that I have to work on. The fact that it's hard for me is not relevant. Nobody's going to make it happen except me, and so I'm the one who has to take responsibility. I talked to a therapist about this once, and I brought up to the therapist that there's an issue in my house surrounding cat litter. We had cats, and cats do what they do, and we had a litter box, and it had to be cleaned sometimes. And Karen and I agreed that it was going to be my job. She did a lot of the other gross things like taking them to the vet and stuff, and it just made sense that that's going to be John's job. But here's the thing. I didn't always feel like doing it. And feelings are very important to me. Think about that emotional state you get into sometime where you are compelled to do stinky, nasty things. I was just never getting into that state. And therefore, I just couldn't do it. Being authentic is very important to me. And having everything that I do be an expression of my core being is very important. So it would be emotionally dishonest for me to clean the cat litter because that's not what's going on inside of me. So I told the therapist this out loud, and she was very moved by my courageous self-acceptance, and she just didn't blink the whole time, and then she just put her face in her hands and sobbed. She was so moved by what I had said. But she responded in a very good way that has really impacted me. She said, "John, if I gave you $1 million to clean the cat litter twice a week without fail for a whole year, Do you think you could do it? And of course I said yes. I mean, that would be the easiest $1 million job in the world. And she said, okay, so what you're saying is that it's not that you can't do it, it's just that you care about money more than you care about your integrity and your promises to your wife. So, therapy is a terrible idea. Take that home with you. So if you ever have that kind of thing where, like, that you kind of need to grow, but then you start thinking, well, I can't because I'm this way and not that way, try the $1 million trick, and it actually does a pretty good job of filtering out those things that you can do, but you just don't care about enough to do. So I finally decided that I should try. Like, I took responsibility. It's like, I want to become more reliable than I am. I think that would be loving of me toward my family and toward my coworkers to become more reliable. So I tried. I made a to-do list. I started putting Post-it notes a few different places to remind me to do stuff, and that lasted about 2 weeks. And then the novelty wore off, and then something inconvenient came up that I didn't really feel like doing, and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to be more authentic again. So trying didn't really do the trick for me. A great teacher once told me that trying to change your behavior is a lot like learning to play the violin. You don't get there by trying to play the violin. You get there by having someone give you lessons. And then you practice the violin, and when you practice, then you become free to play the violin and to do it well. Trying hard isn't going to do it. Trying to speak Arabic is not the way to learn Arabic. You need to train. And that's where we get our next step. It's something that Jesus talked about. He had a favorite metaphor for how growth happens. He noticed how if you have an apple tree that produces rotten apples, the solution is not to tell the tree to try harder. The solution is to pay attention to the tree and notice, you know what, there's something wrong with this tree. It's sick, so it's producing sick apples. And if you can heal the tree, the fruit takes care of itself. And in a likewise manner, if I'm producing unhealthy behaviors, trying to be more healthy isn't going to help me. Having whatever there is about me that is sick, having that healed, that's the solution. So when Jesus met people, he didn't just tell them to be good. He healed them in their bodies and in their minds and in their souls. And that took care of the fruit. It took care of behavior by making them more healthy. And a lot of times that deeper level that you have to get to when you want to change behavior has to do with your beliefs. In psychology, we talk about core beliefs, just assumptions that you make that are so fundamental to you that they really control everything it is that you do. And if you're doing unhealthy things, you want to look for the deep down beliefs that you have that cause those actions and think about them. And what Jesus recommends is, you know what, that belief is making you sick. Throw it out and replace it with a new one. The Bible's word for that is repentance. It just means rethink your thinking or reconsider the things that you believe. And that's the next step that you want to do. Reconsider the things that you believe, because your beliefs can make you sick. So here's how it went down with me. If you had asked me around that time, John, do you value people more than money? I would, of course, say yes. My official list of beliefs and values is very, very positive. If you look at my beliefs and values, if I would list them out, I'm doing great. But again, Jesus with the thing with the fruit, with the tree and the fruit, he said, you know what? If you want to know who someone really is on the inside, just look at the things that they do. Look at the fruit that the tree bears, and whatever kind of fruit that is exactly what's going on inside the person. And when I looked at my behavior, and my therapist helped me to do this, I was behaving as if being reliable to people was not very important. And what that would come out from is the belief that, you know what, people aren't really worth the trouble. That was a very unflattering thing for me to learn about myself, that I didn't have a very high opinion of people and what people are worth and whether they're worth the kind of effort that $1 million would be worth. So I dug a little bit deeper into that. into this deep belief that, or part of me that believed that people weren't worth the trouble. And I noticed that in addition to that, I wasn't really reliable to myself, even, that I seemed to have a belief that I'm not worth the trouble. Sometime in the course of our conversation with my therapist, I brought up the fact that I don't really lock my door at night. Okay, nobody come rob my house now. That I just mentioned, you know what, I come from the country and the rural Iowa, and we're all neighbors, and we don't lock our doors at night. It kind of made me proud of myself. And I was still not doing that, even though I lived in an urban place. And she said, John, that's a big deal. I'm like, no, it's not. But what we came to see, and she was right, that there was this very basic action of self-protection and self-care that I didn't seem to think I was worth doing for. That I was leaving myself open to anybody who wanted to come into my house could. And it was an expression of, deep down, I didn't really feel like I was worth taking care of. So I started locking my door. Now, where would that belief come from? Keep digging a little deeper. Where would I get the idea that I'm not worth taking care of? And before I go into this, I want to preface this by saying my parents are wonderful people. they really are. They tried really hard, and they did so much better than so many parents have done. And I'm grateful to them. They weren't perfect, and they made some mistakes, and sometimes things happened to me that probably shouldn't have happened to me, and I didn't deserve, and it could be argued they should have protected me from those things, but they didn't. It's a complicated story, and that's how reality always is. It's complicated, and it has lists of good and bad, and it's all mixed in together. But whenever I would think about my life, my childhood, and I would kind of tell a summary story of how my childhood went, I would probably say something like, I wasn't well taken care of. That was, if I had to summarize my childhood, that's what I would say to myself or to others. So it's a lot simpler than reality, right? But that was what I would say, because that was just how I felt. That when I looked at my childhood, I didn't think about the places where they really did a great job with taking care of me and providing for me. I looked at all the times that they didn't, when they didn't manage to. So my story about my life was pretty negative. And when I dug a little bit deeper, and this is something Jesus taught me to do, that whenever he talked about what's wrong with people and the things that we do, he always wanted to dig deeper into why they believe the things that they do. And he seemed to think, and I've come to believe he's right, that eventually it gets down to our beliefs about God that cause our problems. That if you believe in, say, a violent God, you're probably going to become a violent person. If you believe in a judgmental God, you're probably going to become judgmental. And when I looked at how I had become an unreliable person, I realized that it was because I believed I had an unreliable God. That not only did my parents not take good care of me, the story in my head went, you know what, God could have taken better care of me. There were things that happened that really shouldn't have happened, and they were rotten things. And God could have stopped them, but didn't. Yeah, you get into some of the deep, dark things here. And so what I believed, I wouldn't have said this out loud, but I think what I truly believed is that God is not reliable. God has not been there for me, has not come through for me. That was my summary of my life with God. And I think that was the root of my tree that was producing not so great apples. So I did that hard work. And the thing is, the way I repented was this. I just started telling myself different stories. I think God has been very reliable to me. It's a true thing. It's true to tell my story that way. There are complications with that story, just like there are with reality, but I just chose which things to focus on. I chose to focus on, that long list of the many ways that God has cared for me. The way that God gave me great parents, honestly, who, weren't perfect, But rather than focusing on those things, I focused on the positive things. Because my faith says that ultimately my story, the story of John, is a good, good story. And the way you know a story is a happy story is because it ends happy. Like, a happy story can have all kinds of loss and suffering and pain in it, but if it ends with a wedding, everything is great. If you look at Shakespeare's plays, the comedy, the tragedies end, everybody dies. That's how you know it's a tragedy, and you don't know until the end. But a comedy, that always ends with a wedding. And part of our faith, or right in the center of our faith, is that the story that God is telling, that we call our universe, that it ends well. That we're not at the ending yet, so it requires faith. But that our story ends well, and that God is going to give us everything we need to be a part of that good ending. And that's what I hang on to, and that's why I've changed my stories about myself to say, God has taken exquisite care of me, and it is absolutely true, and will be proven true one day. And also that my parents took really astounding good care of me. I think they took way better care of me than their parents took care of them. And that is my story about myself now. And I had to learn to start telling myself that story even when it didn't feel natural. And over time, it has started to feel natural. And that's the good news. I've trained my mind in that way. So now is the time to start practicing and trying. That I've started to deal with that deeper down issue where I didn't believe I was worth taking care of. And now that that's starting to heal, I can start thinking about the things that I actually do. And the first thing you want to do is make small commitments to yourself. And for me, this was actually the harder part. You'll also make commitments to people. Making commitments to myself was much harder because no one would know about my keeping them other than me. And that's what makes it powerful. That each time I keep a promise to myself, I'm telling myself, John is worth taking care of. John is worth the effort. And one of the big things that I did, and it's still a pretty big thing, is that I started eating breakfast. I'm not a breakfast person. My stomach doesn't like to have things in it early in the morning. It just doesn't feel good. So a lot of days I would just not eat until I had lunch. And everything that I read told me that that was really not a healthy practice. That if I could eat something, it would be really great if I did so. I made a commitment to myself, and I started drinking a protein shake and having a men's multivitamin together every morning, and it just became a ritual for me. And it was hard for me to do, because every single morning I would be like, you know what, I don't feel like eating. And maybe I should be an authentic person who expresses my feelings out of my behaviors and just not eat because that's just who I am. And I had to learn to not listen to that voice. And instead, listen to a promise that John made to John and decide that John is worth keeping that promise to. So I would start every day with that little practice. And I'm getting there. I'm not 100%. There are mornings when the weaselly little voice wins. But more and more, I'm the one who's winning. And I'm keeping promises to John. And each time I do, it strengthens that ability inside of me. I know someone else who, like the rest of us, or like a lot of us, we stopped wearing pants during COVID. You remember that? So someone I know now works from home pretty much full time, and still doesn't need to wear pants. But she noticed that she's more productive when she wears pants. It's just a little cue to herself that I'm at work now. I'm not in bed. I'm not going to wear my pajamas. I'm going to wear pants. And she wears pants every single day. Can you believe that? That's impressive now. So that's a promise that she made to herself, and she kept it. The key is with this, keep it small. Do something that is very, very attainable for you. And that will make you stronger, and then you can pick something a little bigger. So when you're making small commitments to yourself, it's maybe time to start keeping commitments to other people. One of the small things that I did was I started paying attention to one of my little chores, which is to replace furnace filters in the furnace every 90 days. It's like you're supposed to do that. And what had been happening in the first 20 years of my marriage was that my wife would very kindly remind me to go and do that, kind of like she would sometimes have to remind me to go clean up the cat litter and do my job. But so she would remind me to do the furnace filter, and then I would do it, and then 3 months later, she would remind me again. So one of the things that I did, I was like, I'm gonna remind my own self, dagnabbit. So I set up a reminder on my calendar every 90 days, change the furnace filter. So when it was time, that popped out, and then I went and did it. For some people, this is a really low bar. This was a big deal for me. Every 90 days when I do that is a little victory, like, yay. One place that's a really good place to learn to make small commitments to others and then keep them is church. Church is a gym. It's a training ground for becoming the kind of people that God made us to be. Reliable people who can be trusted to do what they do. One of the things you can do for some people, just showing up at church is a really high standard. I mean, it's hard. I've been there. Maybe something you can do is set some kind of standard of, I'm going to go to church this often, like once a month, or every other week, or every week, whatever seems like a good goal to you. Maybe try that. And then maybe if that week comes up and you're not really feeling it, maybe it would be good to do it anyway, just as a way of keeping a promise to your friends at the journey so that they get to see you. Because if you're not there, they don't get to. But if you set kind of a pattern, that can help you. To go further, you can participate at the journey and be involved in activities and sign up for Open Table or Sevens or Children's Church or Set Up and Take Down. I'm married to the participation administrator of the church, so I have to work in a little commercial for that. It's in the contract. It's because of the cat litter problem. I owed her one. And so I did stuff like that, and I started working more at the journey, and eventually became a care minister where every month we have a little meeting where we work through a book and we learn about personal growth and we do stuff together and get to know each other. And for several years, I was actually in Mark Reitzman's care minister group, and I got to even spend even more time with him and let him rub off on me. And he did, and it was a really good thing for me. So there's a lot of ways that you can move forward in this way, and I encourage you to. This is a great place for doing that. So that was my journey of becoming more reliable, spending time, taking responsibility, reconsidering my beliefs, getting down that deep hole of what your soul is, and then practicing, making those small commitments. I'm not perfect yet. At least that's what I'm told. And that's okay. You know how doctors call what they do practice. Nobody says that I have perfected medicine. Doctors don't say that. They say, I practice medicine. Well, in the same way, I practice reliability. I practice the way of love as taught by Jesus. And as I practice, I'm getting better. And that's the nice thing about reliability, faithfulness, love. I'm better than I used to be. And that's a really great thing for me to get to say. Let's pray. Lord God, we are deeply grateful that you are reliable. You have been the reliable that we have needed from the beginning. We're like babies, and you're like our parent, and you have taken care of us in a way that astounds us and floors us, and it inspires us to want to be like you. And I know that's the whole point, that you're raising us up to be like you, to be loving and to be faithful and to be full of hope and to participate in the amazing things you're doing in our universe, on our planet, and in our community. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for being there for us every time. Help us to become like you. We love you, and we're so excited to be on this adventure with you. In the name of Jesus, our Lord, amen. Now, the message of Jesus is that the one who created the universe is reliable. and can be relied upon to finish the universe in a way that is 100% good and true and beautiful. And it can be difficult to believe that because we're in the middle of the story right now. And in the middle of the story, all kinds of things happen. And we're not necessarily sure that the story is going to end well. I mean, that's the story of anxiety in life, right? But the good news that is available to us is that we can know the one who authored all of this, who has promised us that the story ends well and that we can relax into that and we don't need to be afraid. And that is the story of our faith, and that God provides everything that we need to be a part of that good story and have that good story be our story. At the very front of the room are two tables that symbolize this. That when we come to church, we're not really bringing gifts to God so much as God has gifts for us. That God has everything that we need to become who we were made to be. And it is embodied in a mysterious way in this bread and this wine, which in a mysterious way embody God himself for us. So there is bread and wine and juice on each table. There's a gluten-free bread on this side. And what I'd like to invite you to do is come forward and take the bread and dip it into the wine and take it into yourself as a way of receiving the gift of God giving himself to you so that you can become what you were made to be. The tables are ready. Go when you're prepared.